If you love to crochet motifs, but wish they would stop multiplying into piles that need sewing together later on, then Breakaway Crochet is for you. Some of you might be familiar with my apple bag pattern, which is built up of nothing but this Mini Granny square. But today we're just going to use this little square in a practice swatch without the pressure of making a full-on project. I'm going to show you how to make this practice swatch, working from start to finish with one unbroken length of yarn, no stopping, cutting, or sewing. So before we start breaking all the rules, let's get our bearings by reviewing the old-fashioned way of making one of these squares. These days, it's popular to start these squares with a magic circle, and then make a few chains to count as the first double crochet of the round. But with Breakaway Crochet, we replace this whole opening sequence with one special stitch. So for this particular square, that special stitch is called a floating double crochet 3 together, or DC 3 together in short. And if we look at this square, we are just getting ready to make these bits right here. Not only are we going to make the double crochet 3 together, but we're also going to make the center ring at the same time, all within one single stitch. There are actually a couple different ways to make this stitch, and I'll start with the most efficient way first. So here's how you make our first stitch of the square, our double crochet 3 together. Start with a yarn over, and now we're going to make a floating ring. To make a floating ring, do another yarn over and pinch the yarn close to the hook. And when I say pinch, you're not holding on for dear life. Just hold on to it between your thumb and another finger. Continue with another yarn over, and you're going to grab in the yarn with what you're already pinching. So that means now you have 2 pinched loops. Finish the floating ring with another yarn over and pull through the 2 loops you're pinching. And these 2 little loops here are the floating ring. And that is what replaces the magic circle, and that's where all our stitches are going to be worked into for this one little square. Okay, so that's the floating ring part of the stitch. Let's continue now with the double crochet 3 together part. And for that we're going to use the loops that are already on the hook. And we're going to start with just a yarn over, pull through 2. And because this is a double crochet 3 together, we're not going to finish this double crochet. We're going to go ahead and start the second one in the group in just kind of the normal way. So yarn over, find the floating ring, go through both of those loops, pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That has started the second double crochet of the group. Do that one more time. Yarn over, pull through all 4 loops on the hook. And that has made our floating double crochet 3 together. So if you are new to Breakaway Crochet, I recommend having some practice making this floating double crochet 3 together, and just keep going until you're feeling fairly comfortable with the process. But if you find after some practice that it's still kind of awkward, then stay tuned, because I do have a couple of other ways of making this that might be easier for you. Okay, so coming back to our practice swatch, what we've just made here with this first DC3 together is this stitch right here. And what we're going to do is work along the row here, adding in 5 partial motifs. Okay, so after your first double crochet 3 together, chain 4, and do another DC3 together into the floating ring. Just working the normal way this time. Continue with chain 4, and that is actually as far as we're going to go on this little square. So instead of finishing it off all the way around, this is where this project transitions from a motif project into a project that is worked in back and forth rows. So we are at the point now where we start the next square in the series, even though this one's not finished yet. And to start the next square, we do exactly the same thing we did for this first one. I'll just review that again. Start with your floating DC3 together. Chain 4. And another DC3 together in the floating ring. Chain 4. Go. So in this foundation row, as I'm calling it, because we're setting up our first row of motifs. We've just worked the first 2. We've got 3 more to go. So now here's where I'm going to show you an alternative. Again, if you had trouble making floating rings the way I've just shown you, there are 2 other ways to try. The first involves the use of a stitch marker. So if you would like to use the stitch marker as a prop to make your floating ring, let's go ahead and work it with this stitch here. Again, you'll start with the yarn over for the double crochet part. Now to make the floating ring, do another yarn over and grab the stitch marker. What we're going to do is work through the stitch marker. Just go through, grab the yarn and pull it back through. And you can see now how the stitch marker is holding those loops instead of your thumb and finger. And I'll also say you don't want things to be too far away from the hook in this case. Instead, come a little bit closer, and you do want to have just a little bit of leeway so we can get the hook through the floating ring without too much trouble. So things should look kind of like that. Finish the floating ring with the yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. Okay, there's our floating ring made with the stitch marker. Let's continue the DC3 together as usual with the yarn over, pull through 2. Let's start the second DC, and what we do here is, you see how this kind of looks like a figure of 8? We're going to find that and go through. We're going to actually trace the same route that the stitch marker is taking. We're going to put the hook through those 2 loops. Okay, so just follow through, draw up your loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And now that we've gone through once, that floating ring is a lot easier to see. Let's make our 3rd double crochet in this group and DC3, or work them all together. All right, so there is our DC3 together using a stitch marker. Chain 4, another DC3 into the floating ring. And you can see the stitch marker also gives you something extra to hold on to. Chain 4, and there's our third little square done. And now on to plan C, because some people can actually find the stitch marker a little bit awkward to work with, because getting the hook through there can feel kind of stiff. So if that's the case, another idea is to use a piece of scrap yarn. We'll just make a little loop and use that as our prop this time. So here's the third way of making a floating ring. And let's start with our yarn over, and now the floating ring with another yarn over. Pick up our loop and go through the loop, draw through a thread. And again, you don't want to be too far away or too close. Let's leave some room for the hook to get through. Yarn over, pull through 2. There's our floating ring. Yarn over, pull through 2. And again, you're going to, for the next double crochet, follow the scrap yarn. Just take the same route it is going to find the floating ring for the next 2 stitches. Okay, and there's plan C. Again, chain 4, DC3 together, chain 4, and we are ready for one more square. So let me get this sorted out here. Okay, so those are the first 4 squares to start the row. I'm going to put one more in here off camera and show you what to do next. And that's the foundation row finished. Now before we go on, I think I will remove our props, because that might be a little bit distracting to see what's going on. Alright, and now we've come to a return row. Now, return row just simply means we're going to come back the other way. We're going to finish off these first 4 motifs and work just a little bit more on this one. But notice you don't turn the work. We're just going to keep going around the one square that's at the end of the row. I can also say, if you want to make a bigger swatch, just keep going, following this pattern that we've been using here. Make this as wide as you like. Just make sure you end with the chain 4 after the 2 DC3s together. That's hard to say. Okay, so let's continue with our return row, and this is pretty straightforward. We're just continuing around the motif we were working on before with another DC3 together. Chain 4, DC3 together. Alright, now we're almost finished with this little square. And what we're going to do now is kind of create the last chain 4 space, but at the same time we're going to start the chain 4 space on the other motif. And what I mean by that is, when you come to this point after the 4th DC3 together, just chain 2, find the chain 4 that is between the 2 squares, and slip stitch around those chain 4s. And that closes off that little motif there. See, we've borrowed the first 2 chains of that chain 4 and these last 2 to build up that chain 4 space. Next, continue to the next little square, starting with chain 2, DC3 together, chain 4, DC3 together, chain 2, and slip stitch between this motif and the next around that chain 4. Make sure things aren't twisted on this first row. There's nothing to hold things in place, so things can get twisted. So just make sure everything looks right. And that is our pattern. So just continue that pattern of, where I've done here, the chain 2, DC3 together, chain 4, DC3 together, chain 2, slip stitch until you get to the one here at the end of the row. So now I've reached the last little square, and as I said before, we do something a little bit different there. After the slip stitch and chain 2, we'll work one more DC3 together in this square. So now we're just leaving just 3 there. Chain 4. And this is where we break away from this square and start a new row of squares. Okay, so we'll be slotting in a new square just above this one and working another foundation row. The only difference from now on with the foundation rows is that for any new square we put on, we've got to join it to the row below. What makes this easy about the first one is it's already joined up, so don't have to worry about it there. So I'll just start again this first row. The first square is always different from the rest of the squares in the row. And so we'll start this first square with just a floating DC3 together, chain 4, and that is as far as we're going for the first square of this next foundation row. Alright, so start our next one again with a floating DC3 together, and we are coming up, let me untangle this. Alright, so after this first DC3 together, we're going to start the chain 4 space, but the chain 4 space is where we join this one we're working on to the one before. Alright, so we're not going to work chain 4. Instead, we're going to work halfway through by doing just the chain 2 and join to this chain 4 space here. Alright. So in the pattern, if you're reading a written pattern, I often talk about skipping things behind the hook. In this case, we're going to be skipping 1, 2, 3, 4 DC3s together to come to the next chain 4 space. But really, you should be able to see how it all goes together without counting. We know we've got to join the second square here to the second square in the row below. To make that join, I do a slip stitch like this. So I just tuck the hook down into the space, everything to the left, complete this slip stitch. That's made the join. Now let's continue with this chain 4 space with the other 2 chains on to the DC3 together, chain 4, and that is as far as we're going on this second little square of the second row. Okay, so let's move on to the next square. I'll just whiz past this to give you another quick review of the pattern, which for the rest of the row you're going to be working a floating DC3 together, chain 2, connect this new motif to the one just below, just finding the next available chain 4 space right underneath, chain 2, DC3 together, chain 4. So I will go ahead and work the next two little squares off camera and join you at the end of the row. So that's how things should look here at the end of the row. Just make sure that you only had one DC3 together in the first square. All the other ones here along the row have 2. It's a chain 4 between each one, and there's a join at the chain 4 space that sits between the DC3s. And of course ended with the chain 4 here. And ready for another return row, which is done exactly like we did for this return row down here. Alright, I'll go ahead and work that off camera, but just remember it's after the chain 4. It's DC3 together, chain 4, DC3 together, chain 2, slip stitch, chain 2 is your pattern all the way across. End with slip stitch, chain 2, DC3 together, chain 4. Alright, and now at the end of this return row, we have now pretty much established the pattern. To continue, you're going to do another foundation row, just like we did for this one here, when we're joining up, and then a return row to goes back to the first motif. Foundation, return, foundation, return. Do that for as long as, as long as you want the piece. In our case, I'm going to be doing 5 rows of motifs. Alright, and again, don't be concerned about these first ones on the left hand edge not being finished. Alright, that's something we take care of at the very end. From here on, these left hand edge little squares are only going to have the 2 DC3 togethers and the chain 4. Alright, so don't let that throw you off. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and work 3 more rows off camera and join you again. And now that my swatch is as long as I want it to be, just want to check to make sure everything's in order. Okay, so all of these squares along the row, all of these are finished, and they're all joined to the one below through the chain 4 spaces. But as you can see, again, these ones along the left hand edge are not finished, each one with just 2 DC3 togethers, the last one with 3 3 together. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to take care of this situation now. This is always the last thing to do, is to finish the left edge after you've reached your total length. And this is pretty straightforward. Just pivot around, and once you are looking at it from this orientation, this looks exactly like you have just done a foundation row. So you just need to come back with essentially a return row, just like we've done before. Again, with the DC3 together, chain 4, DC3, chain 2, slip stitch, chain 2, so on and so forth. And of course, when you get to the last one, you only need to work that last DC3 together, chain 4, and finish off. So I'll go ahead and finish that off for you now. So just coming up on the very last square of the row, I've done the chain 2, slip stitch between, chain 2, and let's finish that up with our DC3 together. Make our last chain 4 space and slip stitch into the stitch with the yarn tail. So again, with breakaway crochet, 9 times out of 10 the very last stitch you make goes into the very first one we made in the whole project. Alright, so there is our swatch complete. I hope this gave you some good practice, and I hope that you have a go at the apple bag, but of course you can think of your own projects. For anything you want to do that is either square or rectangular, you're good to go. Just remember, you make it as wide as you want by adding on as many squares as you want in the first foundation row, and then working back and forth in foundation rows and return rows until you get to the full length, and then finish the left edge just like we've done here. So please write in if you have any questions. I'd love to hear what ideas you have for projects to make with this little square. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.